What's up, nerds and nerdettes, and we little nerdlings all? It's your buddy Big John and G from Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming, and my friends, I am back. Another Midday Monologue Monday coming at you on my lunchtime. So we had a lot of rain last night, and New York City's actually a little chilly. Don't usually see that in June around here, but me, I'm loving it because I like the chilly weather. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about today is something that I really love, but there seems to be a bit of contention from what I've read in the board gaming community, and it doesn't change how I feel. So what I want to talk to you about today is one of my favorite types of games. There's a lot of different styles of games out there. Some of them overlap. Some of them are more than just one style, like take that style games, like a Munchkin game. It's a game where you're literally doing that. You're telling other players, essentially, take that when you play a card against them. There are games out there that are deck builders, where you literally build the deck that you were going to be playing from as you were playing the game. So you were able to change up strategies on the fly, by acquiring different cards into your deck during the course of the game. There's a lot of different style games out there. One versus all games are fairly popular. I can take them or leave them depending on what the game is, and that's essentially a game where, in a way, it's kind of like a role-playing game in the sense that you have one person that everyone is playing against. Not that everyone plays against a dungeon master or game master, but I think you understand what I mean when I say there's a little something there. My favorite style of board game over the last couple of years has definitely turned out to be what is arguably, and I mean that, arguably called sandbox games. Yeah, just like video games. Sometimes they're referred to as open world games, and even that, there's contention over whether that's the same thing or a different thing anyway. But as far as a board game goes, in order for a board game to be in order for a board game to be considered a sandbox game or open world game, it is going to be different than a video game. Let's get that straight right up front. Video games, MMOs, like World of Warcraft, are very big. They are considered sandbox games and probably closest to being a sandbox game more than anything else. But board games, there's a lot of arguments in the board gaming community whether sandbox games for board games really exist at all, or whether it is something that that really does exist. But there's this huge argument that goes back and forth about it. So I wrote down a definition that I came across on a Board Game Geek thread, and I liked it. It sounded to me what a sandbox game is supposed to be. So a sandbox game, as defined by Techopedia, that I saw on BGG. A sandbox is a style of game in which minimal character player limitations are placed on the gamer, allowing that gamer to roam the game board at will. The emphasis of roaming allows the gamer to select their own tasks. The player chooses their character's path to victory. I love this. The first game that I came across as a sandbox game is considered one of the least sandboxy styles, apparently, by a lot of the other board gamers. And that game was Merchant and Marauders. It's an Age of Sail game of pirates and, well, merchants. And the game starts off where you're going to be choosing one or two ships, and three ships, I think. One ship is really good if you want to be a pirate, another's really good if you want to be a merchant, and the other's kind of catch-all. It's not quite as good as either or the other one for its main purpose, but it can do both jobs fairly well. I really like that game. That game is what introduced me to the style of sandbox open world board games. And what I like most about that isn't the fact that you can choose whether you're going to be a merchant or a marauder, but you can also just be an adventurer. It doesn't say that in the rules, and there's nothing in the title for that, but you can just go on missions and follow rumors and, well, basically have adventures. That's pretty much all I ever do in Merchants and Marauders. Now, I admit I have not won a game, but I have had so much fun that I just keep playing it. And that's what a board game's about, really. So that was the first game that I came across. And then right away I was like, oh my goodness, are there more games like this? Where they're non-linear, where it's not telling me that in order to get to victory, I have to start here and I have to take this path. Or, you have to follow the board. That's a little bothersome. Not as bothersome as roll to move. I'm really over roll to move. To me, a board game should have at least a little bit of strategy, and moving is a major part of strategy, I think, in most games. Pardon me. I think probably the most in-depth Sandbox game that I've played and very happily owned is Eldritch Horror. Now, I'm not very big anymore. I got into a big kick with Cthulhian, mythos, Lovecraftian themed board games. But I've quickly gotten over that, and I've mentioned that before in other vlogs. Mainly because if you're familiar with H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard's mythos, or any of the other mythos writers, one of the things that really defines these stories is hopelessness. The protagonists are not going to win, and if by some chance they do win, they're coming out with this victory in one hand and insanity in the other hand. So they may have saved everything, but on a personal level, they did not win. But with that being said, let me just say that Eldritch Horror is a fantastically fun Cthulhian-inspired game. It is more of a storytelling game than most other board games I've ever played, actually. The game is driven by the story of the particular ancient one that you are trying to stop. And that game continued to blow my mind away as far as Sandbox or open world style games go. I do. I love these. As I said, these are my favorite style of board games because they offer more of an adventure than any other style of board game that I've played. Now, you might not be playing board games just because you seek an adventure. That's fine. You want to play the board games, buy the board games that mean something to you. There's a reason for it. Me, I love adventure. To me, that's the most fun part of doing anything like this, whether it's a video game or a board game or an RPG. It's about the adventure. So there are a few games out there like Eldritch Horror or Merchants and Marauders. Some of them are more story-driven, such as Fallen Land, a post-apocalyptic board game, is very story-driven with the cards, but there isn't a connection with the stories. While with Eldritch Horror, there is a stronger, I won't say a great connection, because cards are still going to be randomized, but there is probably a stronger connection between the story cards and that than any other board games that I've played. But Fallen Land comes darn close, because it does have a very, very story-driven aspect to every single card that you're going to draw in that game. Probably the most famous or well-received Sandbox-style game, Mage Knight, has been around for a while. It's a great solo game. It's a great cooperative game. It's a great open world game that allows you to move how you want and achieve the things you need as you see fit. Now, the maker of that game, whose name I'm not going to try to butcher, I'm not going to try to butcher it. He also co-created another game along the same style as Mage Knight, open world game, and that's a sci-fi version, though. It's a franchise sci-fi game called Star Trek Frontiers, and it uses the same basic engine with a few tweaks to the rules that they've come up with over the years. So if you like sci-fi, see, now that's the thing, that there are open world sandbox games for most of the genres that you're going to find in board games, most of the big genres. So like I said, if you like fantasy, Mage Knight is probably the top of the list for sandbox games. If you like horror, then yeah, definitely Eldritch Horror, I'd have to say, in my opinion, is the top of the list of sandbox games in the horror genre. Fallen Land, definitely post-apocalyptic, I'd say, because the entire game is just open world sandbox. There are a few other post-apocalyptic games out there that have aspects of this, They have a little bit of feeling of open world, of sandbox, but generally speaking, overall, most of the games don't hit the mark like Fallen Land does. Now, there's another game isn't even out on the market now. You could, I think, you can pre-order it from the Kickstarter, and that's Western Legends. So it takes the old West and delivers that in a sandbox-style open-world game where you're going to decide how you're going to challenge the game. You're going to challenge the game by being an outlaw and a cattle rustler, or by being a lawman, maybe by being a miner, or maybe a rancher. There's a lot of different ways, and you don't have to stick with just one. In almost all of these sandbox games that I'm going to be talking about, you're not necessarily forced to stick to just whatever you start off doing. Like in Merchants and Marauders, you might start off as a pirate, but then end up buying better ships and equipment, where it's going to seem reasonable to you to you're going to make more points if you do less piracy and more mercantiling. So yeah, but Western Legends. So Merchants and Marauders, as I was just saying, that's a great Age of Sail game that fits into the Age of Sail category. Got a few other sci-fis, two others, another franchise sci-fi. The franchise is huge. The game made a gigantic splash when it hit the market a couple of years back, and that's Firefly, the game. And that has a light feel to it with the sandbox. I think that if you get the Pirates and Bounty Hunter expansion, that'll open it up to feeling a little bit more sandboxy, because it'll give you at least the other option of bounty hunting to do. So that's a fairly fun game. I actually own it, but I haven't gotten into the table yet. I'm waiting to see how much fun it actually is going to be playing through. And then another one that's probably the lightest on the list. It's one of the most argued I've seen in the forums, that's for sure. And that's Zia, Legend of a Drift System. I got the game. Me and the 20-sided Warriors have played it a few times. We absolutely love the game. I'm looking forward to getting the expansion for that game. Embers of a Forsaken Sun or Forsaken Star. Yeah. So I definitely want to get that because me and the gang just love the base game so much. But not every single style and genre that you think of has a sandbox out there, and I'm kind of hoping to see more of it. Like, I'm generally tired of zombie games, but I would be very interested in possibly spending my hard-earned cash on a zombie style sandbox game, something like Dead of Winter meets Fear of the Walking Dead, or Walking Dead, kind of thing. I think that would work, because just like zombie television shows and movies, it's not about the zombies. The zombies are really nothing more than a force of nature that runs rampant through the scene from time to time, like the old man in the sea kind of thing. If you really think about it, that's all zombies really serve a purpose for. It's the real horror in zombie stories are humans, or you and me. That's the real horror in those. I would definitely like to see that. I'd be also really interested in seeing a sandbox open-style world game that took place in the roaring 20s of America. Prohibition, gangsters, Tommy guns, fedoras. Speakeasies. I would be very interested in possibly putting down my money on that also, if it's done halfway decently. If it's an open box, sandboxy style kind of world, and it's on a genre I like, I'm definitely going to want to be there. Another one I thought was interesting was feudal Japan. Trying to navigate the honor system, saving face. I think that would make a really remarkably interesting victory-style game for sandboxing. Feudal Japan, ancient Nippon, samurais. That's a very interesting world system. And finally, and I've mentioned this before because it's so much fun, but I would definitely love, more than any other genre out there, I would definitely love to give over my hard-earned cash for an open-world sandbox-style game that was superheroes. I mean, just imagine being able to earn victory points by either stopping villains, or by being a villain, or in your civilian identity as well. You can garner victory points through that. I think it'd be a very interesting idea, and I would very much, that'd be the first. That would be the first of any new sandbox open world style board game that I would be interested in getting. I would get that before I would get a Feudal Japan or the Roaring Twenties or a zombie game or come to think of it off the top of my head, I'd also like to see a general horror game. Like along the lines of a Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, Betrayal at House on the Hill kind of style. I think done in the right way, a general horror game could make a fairly good, interesting sandbox game. But that's it. Sandbox games are definitely my favorite style of game, that's for sure. And I wish it was more of them. My only problem, before I sign off, with sandbox style games, and it's a minor problem. It shouldn't even count as a problem. It's something I personally find just a little bit irksome, and that's these games tend to be epic in time. The sandbox. I've never sat down for less than 2.5 hours with any of my sandbox games. They usually take 3-4 hours sometimes because you're getting so much into it. Thematically, you get sucked into these sandbox games. All right, my friends, I want to say thank you for spending a little time with me. Thank you for checking us out on Facebook and on Twitter and the occasional Instagram that we jump on every now and then, just to remind everyone that we know we have an Instagram account. And of course, as always, thank you, each and every one of you. Thank you so much for hitting that subscribe button, remembering to make us a part of your regular YouTube subscription. That means so much to us. Anyway, my friends, I'm your buddy Big Johnny G for Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming, and my friends, as you know, I am out of here.